You ever stop and think, how can one ancient book, like the Bible, mean so many different things to so many different people? I mean, we're talking across thousands of years. It seems impossibly complex, right? Well, what if I told you there's a really simple but powerful metaphor that unlocks the whole thing? Let's get into it.
And this is it. This is the big idea for our whole discussion today. Just let that sink in for a second. Scripture is like a coloring book in words. I mean, think about a coloring book, right? The lines are fixed. They're not going anywhere. But the space inside those lines, that's an open invitation for creativity, for interpretation. It's a brilliant way to frame this. So it really breaks down into two key parts. First, you've got the outline. That's the text itself, the words on the page. They're ancient, they're fixed, they are what they are. And then you have the coloring. Now that's where we come in. That's our interpretation, our imagination. It's where our lives meet the text and bring it to life with all sorts of meaning.
Okay, so to really see how this plays out, let's go way back. Let's look at how the earliest Jewish and Christian readers handled this. They had this incredibly rich, multi-layered way of coloring in the text. And we're going to use the very first page of the Bible, Genesis 1, as our test case.
So this ancient palette had like 4 different layers of color, 4 senses of Scripture. First up is Peshat. That's the literal plain sense. You read it and it says, God created the world in an ordered sequence. Pretty straightforward. But then, things get interesting with Remez. This is the allegorical layer, the hints. Like, how could there be light on day 1 before the sun was created on day 4? That hints at a deeper divine kind of light, right? Then you've got Durash, which is the moral takeaway. The lesson for us. If God brought order out of chaos, well then we're called to bring order to the chaos in our own lives. And finally, you get to Sod. This is the deep, mystical stuff. The idea that in the beginning wasn't just some event way back when. It's happening right now. God is creating in every single moment.
And here's what's so amazing about this. For these ancient readers, these layers weren't contradictions. Not at all. They were harmonies. You could hold the literal history, the symbolic truth, the moral challenge, and the mystical reality all at the same time, looking at the very same page. Each layer just added another dimension, making the picture richer and deeper.
All right, so that's the ancient palette. But what about today? Does this coloring book idea still hold up? Well, let's take that exact same page, Genesis 1, but this time, let's hand the crayons over to 3 very different modern professionals and see what they come up with.
And this is where it gets really interesting. A scientist looks at Genesis 1, and what do they see? They see a kind of cosmic choreography. They're looking for patterns, for emergent complexity. Their colors are things like graphs, data, spectra, and timelines. Okay, now let's give the crayons to an attorney. They're not seeing patterns. They're seeing legally binding decrees, a covenant being set in stone. Their colors are sharp, right? Black ink on a contract, gold for the seal of authority. And what about an accountant? They see a cosmic audit. Every time it says, God saw that it was good, that's a check mark on a perfectly balanced ledger, all leading up to the great surplus of the Sabbath rest.
And this really gets to the core of it, doesn't it? The outline of Genesis 1, the text itself, is so robust, so strong, that it can hold all of these wildly different colorings. The scientist, the attorney, the accountant, they're not changing the words on the page, they're just using their unique toolkits to light up different facets of the same brilliant diamond.
So this brings up a huge question, right? If you can color the page in all these different ways, are there any rules? I mean, is it just a total free-for-all where anything goes? Well, as it turns out, the text itself gives us a very clear, and I mean very serious, guardrail.
Right at the very, very end of the Christian Bible, in Revelation, you get this stark warning. It's almost like the author steps onto the page and says, hey, listen up. The outline is mine. Don't you dare redraw it. It's an incredibly powerful statement about protecting the integrity of the text itself.
And this chart just lays it out perfectly. It captures the whole dynamic of the coloring book. What's forbidden? Redrawing the outline. You can't change the words, you can't add stuff, you can't take stuff away. But what's permitted? Coloring the page. You are absolutely encouraged to interpret with humility, to wrestle with the meaning, to explore all the space between the lines. So with those rules in place, what does it look like when things go wrong? Well, let's go back to the beginning. The Bible's very first story about human choice introduces a challenge that is so subtle. It's not about breaking the outline. It's about twisting it. And there it is. That one little question, the serpent in Genesis 3. Did God really say? This is the ultimate test, you see. The serpent doesn't tell Eve to rip out the page or scribble over the words. No, it's way more subtle than that. It just plants a tiny seed of doubt. It tempts her to question, to distort, to misread the outline that God had already given.
And this, right here, reveals the true test of interpretation. It's not just about being creative, it's about discernment. You see, the serpent's question doesn't attack the rules themselves, it attacks our trust in the one who made the rules. It's a subtle nudge to blur the lines, to let our own coloring twist into a kind of rebellion against the original design. So the real question for us becomes, are we coloring to bring out the beauty of the picture, or are we letting our doubts distort the whole thing?
And that brings us right back to where we started. It's this beautiful and, sometimes challenging dance of interpretation. The lines are God's, the space between is ours. We honor that sacred, fixed outline that we've been given. But we're also invited to pour our lives, our questions, and our faith into that space. Always, always remembering who the author is.
And that really leaves us with one final thought. This isn't just about ancient scripture. For any text, any idea, any tradition that you hold sacred, the question is exactly the same. The outline is there, so how are you going to color the page?